Hey guys, Vance from the My Latin Life podcast here. Today we have a special bonus episode for you where I'm guesting on a Brazilian Portuguese podcast. So in this podcast, they're going to be speaking Portuguese. I'm going to be responding in English. So it's a bilingual podcast in that sense. And I highly recommend you give it a listen, even just for like 5 minutes. I know if you don't speak Portuguese, it might be intimidating, but it might be interesting for you to see the dynamic of how I listen and how I respond in English. And you can kind of get a feel for my listening skills in Brazilian Portuguese. So the podcast is called Contra o Vento Podcast, which means Against the Wind. It's hosted by SETI. It's hosted by Francisco Litvai and Rafael Lima. You might know that name, Francisco Litvai. He's also very active on Twitter. He's a previous podcast guest on the My Latin Life podcast and overall friend of the show. So without further ado, enjoy this bonus episode, this bilingual bonus episode. It was really fun to do, and I hope you guys enjoy it as well.
Sejam muito bem-vindos a mais um episódio do Contra o Vento Podcast, onde nós conversamos com nômades, imigrantes, empreendedores, investidores internacionais para ajudar você a viver uma vida sem fronteiras. Meu nome é Francisco Litvai, falando pela provavelmente penúltima vez aqui de Bucaramanga, Colômbia. Estou chegando na minha época agora de ir para o Brasil, visitar a família um pouco. E como co-host hoje temos o Diogo Duarte. Diogo, como que você tá? Tá falando de onde? Tá de volta no Rio?
Fala, Chico, tudo ótimo? Tô mais uma vez aqui no Rio de Janeiro. Ansioso para dar uns pulinhos para visitar outros lugares que de família já tô legal.
Já basta, né?
Já basta.
Viver do lado é foda, eu entendo. Mas, beleza. A conversa de hoje vai ser com um convidado muito especial. A gente já tá tentando chamar ele para cá faz bastante tempo, mas finalmente conseguimos fazer acontecer. Com o Vance, do My Latin Life, o meu site favorito sobre temas de América Latina. O Vance é um canadense que decidiu abandonar a vida no Canadá e se aventurar pelo mundo, eventualmente tendo como base a América Latina. E hoje a gente vai escutar dele por que ele tomou a decisão, por que ele escolheu viver onde está vivendo agora, América Latina, e também vai trazer dicas muito boas sobre os vários países da região que ele conhece muito bem. Vance, e claro, para quem está escutando, a gente vai falar em português, o Vance entende português, mas ele vai responder em inglês para facilitar a conversa, então, podcast bilíngue para todos. Vance, como que você tá? Tá falando de onde?
Yeah, man. Obrigado pelo convite.
Nice. Você tá falando de onde agora? Em qual país que você tá?
México.
Favorito dos americanos e canadenses, não tem dúvida. Vance, fala um pouco mais pra gente começar a conversa sobre a sua história pessoal, assim, o que você fazia profissionalmente e, mais importante de tudo, por que você decidiu ir embora do Canadá?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a Canadian American, right? And living in Latin America. Been living in Latin America for over 5 years and have no real intentions to return to living back in the US or Canada full time. I much prefer life in Latin America for a number of reasons. And that's kind of how My Latin Life came about, was I saw that there was this mega trend of gringos who are interested in traveling and living in Latin America, and that the region was very under-traveled and also under-discussed. Like, there was not a lot of information in English about Latin America, and actually there's not even a lot of information in Spanish and Portuguese about a lot of Latin America. And so basically it's really for digital nomads who want to live maybe several months at a time in Latin America, or for expats or retirees. So lots of people are retiring to Latin America, lots of expat families are moving to Latin America, and it's a really interesting mega trend that we're seeing.
Sim, com certeza. E é algo que, para quem tá nesses círculos do Twitter, consegue ver bem, né, o movimento de americanos e canadenses para América Latina, mas que eu acho que muitos brasileiros ainda não entendem o porquê. né? Mesmo no nosso grupo do Telegram, a gente vê muito brasileiro que ainda tem o sonho Canadá, né? Eu vou ir trabalhar no Canadá e vou ganhar bem, e vou ter qualidade de vida e tudo mais. É, então, às vezes, isso pode vir como um choque, né? Porque um canadense vai vir para um país como o Brasil, um país como o México. Você poderia elaborar um pouco mais em o que te fez sair do Canadá?
There's a lot of ways I could answer this, but I really like one way that Lawrence King has described on Twitter, which is the idea that you shouldn't follow what poor and desperate people are doing, which is, showing up at the southern border or moving from Brazil to Canada. What you should be following is what rich people are doing. What are wealthy people with mobility and options, what are they doing? And what we're increasingly seeing is that rich, wealthy people are leaving high tax countries, they're leaving cold countries, and they're going to live where they're treated best. They're going to places with low taxes, they're going to places with a better lifestyle. The reason people want to leave Brazil is because they want to maybe make more money or improve their condition. But, once you get to a certain point, there's only so much you can spend per month, and I would imagine that most Brazilians would rather live in Brazil if they could make something on the order of 5 or 10 or $10,000 a month, let's say, in Brazil. There would be no reason to move to Canada. In fact, you would not want to do that in most cases. So people who come from a certain background, I totally get it. Like if I was Brazilian and from maybe like a lower socioeconomic class, I could definitely understand saying to Canada. I'm not saying, people shouldn't. I mean, I think it makes sense for a lot of people. But if you look at rich and wealthy people, they're kind of doing the opposite.
O que faz bastante sentido, no caso, se a gente olha, na verdade, eu diria que das migrações, né, tem muito milionário indo embora do Brasil especificamente. Né? O Brasil, acho que não foi o melhor exemplo, em termos de onde os ricos estão indo, mas sim para América Latina, que a gente vê muitos indo pro Paraguai, pro Uruguai, pro Panamá. Acho que sim, vejo essa tendência na América Latina de forma geral, só com alguns, sei lá, Argentina e Brasil que estavam mandando os milionários mais embora, né? Mas eu concordo, né? Realmente são objetivos diferentes para estilos de vida diferentes. Você está buscando um emprego que vai te dar um bom dinheiro, você provavelmente vai achar isso no Canadá mais do que no Brasil. Mas se você já tem o dinheiro, né, o que você vai fazer num lugar frio e escuro? Né?
Exatamente.
No seu caso, você tinha alguma renda remota? Como que você fez assim para poder financiar então essa mudança?
Yeah, making money online is extremely important, and I think that everyone should want to do that, even if they don't want to leave their country, even if they're totally happy where they are, if they're totally happy with their family and friends and their current situation, you should still want to work online because all else being equal, it's going to provide you so much more freedom and flexibility in your life. If you have a family, that means you can spend more time with your kids. If you're single, that means you could, I don't know, maybe spend more time at the beach house or something like that. You know what I mean? Like even if you truly love life in Sao Paulo, wouldn't you still want to work online so that you could spend more time down in Guarujá at the beach and go surfing and stuff like that? So I think everyone should want to work online, and that was my original goal. I read the book The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss maybe a decade ago. Classic book, and that was one of my original inspirations to make money online and put a plan in action to make that happen. It was a lot harder to make money online when I got started, but it's definitely a lot easier these days. And I've been making money online for over 5 years and traveling the world, and it's been amazing.
For sure. E para não desencorajar o pessoal que tem uma carreira tradicional, digamos, em que é difícil ou até mesmo impossível trabalhar online, né? Sei lá, um um soldador, um mecânico, alguma coisa assim, também tem a opção, tem algumas outras opções nesse caso, né? Se a pessoa ainda quer aproveitar a vida viajando ou com mais flexibilidade. Uma seria, faz a saída para o Canadá ou para os Estados Unidos por alguns anos, constrói um patrimônio que daí você possa viver dele, né? Digamos, faz, não sei, 100 mil, 200 mil dólares ao ano nos Estados Unidos, compra 5 imóveis e vive de aluguel, né? Claro, leva tempo, mas renda remota não significa necessariamente que você vai ser programador, sabe? Pode ser você construir o seu patrimônio e depois você consegue rendimentos sobre esse patrimônio, ou até mesmo, dependendo do país, uma aposentadoria, que no Canadá já ajuda muito mais do que uma aposentadoria no Brasil, imagino. Do My Latin Life, inclusive, eu gostaria de saber, assim, o pessoal que chega para você, a maioria é o pessoal que já trabalha remotamente, o programador, trader, coisas assim, ou tem muita gente que tem trabalhos tradicionais e tá se mudando para América Latina?
I'd say most people work online, or if they don't, they're messaging me because they want to work online, and they want me to solve that for them. But I think it's really important. It's like a very fundamental building block upon which these other building blocks of internationalization and so forth are built upon. So we can't do all this other things like, send money to Uruguay and, this and that and offshore companies and second passports and all the things you talk about on SETI. It's very hard to do that stuff if you're not making money online. So making money online is really like the fundamental thing. And people should come to me once they're already making money online. Because there's lots of online gurus out there. I'm not trying to be that guy. There's a lot of people you can learn how to make money online from. And then once you're making money online and you're ready to internationalize and take things to the next level, that's where I really start helping people.
Uhum. Do lado do trabalho remoto, inclusive, eu recomendaria para quem entende inglês bom, se você está escutando o podcast até agora, você provavelmente já entende inglês. O próprio podcast do My Latin Live tem, 6 episódios já sobre trabalho remoto, sobre como conseguir uma renda remota. Então, ali já tem também bastante material bem interessante para quem está buscando um primeiro trabalho remoto.
Dude, I should mention, by the way, that I've listened to the SETI podcast where you guys have mentioned me like a whole bunch of times. I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but like I listen to the SETI podcast and I've listened to a bunch of times where you've just mentioned me like in passing, and I was like, ooh, it's like, and so I'm happy to finally be here.
Eu também gosto de escutar o podcast do My Latin Life. De vez em quando você menciona os episódios que a gente gravou junto, ou que eu recomendei alguma pessoa pro podcast, o caso do Thibaut, enfim. Então é mútuo, o sentimento é mútuo. Uma coisa, Diogo, você ia falar alguma coisa?
Sim, eu ia fazer o jabá da nossa parte, porque nós temos 3 artigos sobre trabalho remoto, inclusive tem 60 links para sites de trabalho remoto, então não precisa a pessoa virar a vida ao avesso. Pega um bico, você vai conseguir alguma coisa. E os nossos podcasts também, mas jabá rápido, pode seguir.
Exato. Trabalho remoto tem material suficiente sobre nos 2 sites. O foco aqui é América Latina. Voltamos pro tema principal. Vence, eu tenho uma pergunta então. Você saiu do Canadá, mas a gente sabe, pessoal que vai virar nômade digital, vai viajar pelo mundo. Geralmente a gente está falando de 3 regiões principais, né? Europa, Sudeste Asiático e América Latina, como diria os 3 destinos maiores dos expats. Por que América Latina e não Tailândia ou Espanha ou alguma coisa assim?
Well, the reason it's not Asia is just because the time zone. Like for Americans, the time zone just really doesn't work. If you're working with American clients, it really doesn't work. That's why you're going to see more Australians, you're going to see more Europeans in Asia. You'll see some Americans, but a lot of the Americans that are in Asia, either they make money in Asia or they're sacrificing a lot to be there. Like you'll go to some of these co-workings in Thailand and stuff, and you'll see some American guy there at 3 a.m. taking a sales call. You know what I mean? And that I'm not really down with that. So that's why for me, Europe and Latin America are the two places I like to spend time. Personally, I do spend some time in Europe. Like I've gone pretty much every year for a couple months, and I like it, but I do feel like something's still missing in Europe, and it's a lot of the feeling that's missing in Canada and the US as well, where it just seems kind of boring, and it's just not as energetic enough and as fast paced enough. Actually, just before we started recording this one, I was recording a podcast for My Latin Life with a guy named Swedish Gringo. I'm not sure, maybe Francisco, you've seen the Swedish Gringo guy? Because I can get him, I can hook you guys up so that he does a SETI episode. But yeah.
Conheço, não conheço, mas pode mandar o contato sim.
Okay, so he's a YouTuber. He's Swedish, and he's a YouTuber that's like based in Rio, living in Brazil, and you know what I mean, like going to carnival and all this stuff. And I think he's like one of the main kind of gringo YouTubers in Brazil. You have Chim Explica and a couple of these guys, and the Swedish gringo's up there. But anyway, so we were recording an episode, and he was saying that like when he goes home to Sweden, he really feels like something is missing, and that he's been so long in Brazil, like I think it's been about like 3 years straight, that he's at the point where he wouldn't be able to go back to normal Swedish life and Swedish society and work in an office because he's just got that Brazil inside him now, and that wild like Rio life. Like once you've had that wild Rio lifestyle, or for me just kind of Latin American lifestyle in general, it's very hard to go back to like a boring civilized place.
Sim, eu entendo o que você está falando, assim, é uma questão de, eu diria que é caos, realmente, é o caos do terceiro mundo, é o caos dos países latino-americanos, que acho que tem esse efeito. Eu gosto de citar um exemplo, às vezes, a Vitória Galasso, parceira nossa aí da Liber Action, um abraço para Vitória Galasso, viveu na Suíça, brasileira, viveu na Suíça por muitos anos. No fim das contas, decidiu voltar para o Brasil. Mas, pô, como assim? Uma pessoa vai da Suíça, que é para ser o país mais livre do mundo, o país mais melhor renda, mais seguro, mais qualidade de vida em tudo e tudo mais, e volta para o Brasil. Claro, existem vários fatores, mas um que eu lembro que ela falou muito bem era a questão da liberdade a nível da sua rotina mesmo, né? Assim, a Suíça ela pode ter mais liberdade, talvez institucional, de maior liberdade de expressão ou liberdade de, sei lá, fazer homeschooling, esse tipo de coisa, mas é extremamente regulado todo o resto de, não, você pode somente ventilar a sua janela por 2 horas ao dia durante o inverno, e você precisa botar o seu lixo para fora, sei lá, no dia tal, horário tal, senão tem tem uma multa específica, e qualquer coisa que você quer fazer, você tem que pedir uma autorização, um formulário, sabe? Acho que são muitas regras. Acaba que
And it's not just at the society level, it's just like how people interact as well. Like it's so I don't know, it's just so boring how people interact in like Canada and in Switzerland and places like that, where just the way that people interact in Brazil, in Latin America, having might be a 3-year-old kid's birthday and there's like 5 kegs of beer and like loud music and this type of stuff, and it's not even really for the 3-year-old. It's like for I don't know, it's like more for the friends and just like an excuse to get a party going. And when you go to Switzerland or Canada, you're not having like a keg party for a 3-year-old. You might have like some superheroes and a birthday cake or something, but you're not going to have like a real thing. And I think the family values and the closeness of people and the lack of kind of social barriers in Latin America, it's kind of hard to explain because there are still rules of social conduct, but they're just different. I like the family values and how everyone's close together. I like how the in other social groups, how like single people obviously behave different, and really just like all the different types of social interaction are quite different in Latin America, and it's fun, it's addicting.
Eu gosto que o Vence acabou de descrever como foi meu aniversário de 1 ano de vida. Foi exatamente assim. Sem tirar nem pôr. Vence, aproveitando, qual foi o primeiro país da América Latina para qual você foi? Você veio direto do Brasil? Você foi primeiro para o México? Onde você
It was
começou
Mexico.
sua experiência? México. Poderia falar mais como é que foi o primeiro impacto?
Yeah, the like what really impacted me was a lot of what I was saying. Like, the music was different. When I was growing up, we didn't have reggaeton music and like such sexual music. We had rap, and I was listening to Wu-Tang and this type of stuff, and rock and AC/DC and stuff. But we didn't really have like sexual music. We didn't have dancing. We had like Usher and shit like that. But it's like it's different, right? And you go to Latin America and like you go to your first nightclub and you listen to reggaeton, or obviously in Brazil it's like funky, and it's just like such a different experience, and it's just a higher level of fun that I say like basically the most boring average night out in Latin America is more fun than like the funnest night of your life in Switzerland or Canada. Like, just if you're from Switzerland, you've just never had fun in your life. And it's, maybe some people like that, I don't know. But if you're from Austria, like some of Francisco's family, or Switzerland, and you go to a Brazil funky party and a baile in the favela or something, it's just such a fun and like insane experience that sucks that some people will never get to experience that in their life. It's just so much more fun. It's just like it's a whole different thing.
Sim. Eu acho que uma coisa que eu me lembro muito do meu tempo na Áustria é que o plano de fim de semana, muitas vezes, era simplesmente se juntar com os amigos para beber, só para tomar cerveja e ficar conversando. E não que isso também não aconteça na América Latina, existe muito disso. Mas eu acho que tem mais de realmente sair pra dançar ou sair pra fazer alguma atividade fora, especialmente no Rio de Janeiro, pô, ir pra praia o tempo todo. Não é aquela coisa de você. Tem a praia tá ali, mas sei lá, é muito frio, ninguém quer ir pra praia, ninguém vai de fato fazer nada na praia, só a praia está ali, eu vivo perto da costa. Não, no Rio e também em Santa Catarina, a praia é uma atividade, sabe, diária. É uma parte da rotina, digamos, de grande parte das pessoas que estão vivendo por lá. Esse contato, assim, com atividades sociais, além de simplesmente sentar, tomar álcool e ficar aí conversando, acho que é algo que eu gosto muito da América Latina também. Sabe, que você estava falando, realmente me lembra meus tempos de Áustria. Não sei se assim, mesmo as melhores cidades do Canadá, sei lá, Toronto, alguma coisa assim, não tem vida noturna legal? É isso que você está dizendo?
Yeah, I've done lots of partying in, Toronto, Montreal, New York City, San Francisco, Texas, like anywhere in I bet Vegas. I partied everywhere in North America, and it's just not nearly as fun as it is in Latin America. Like, not even close. Not even close. It's crazy. Like you could go to like a Brazilian city with like 300,000 people, and it'll have better nightlife than like Vegas practically. I mean, that might be a slight exaggeration, but like a 300,000 person city in Brazil will have better nightlife than a city 10 times the size in the United States.
Faz sentido. Vamos pegar um pouco uma timeline, assim. Quais foram os países latino-americanos que você mais passou tempo desses 5 anos?
Definitely Mexico. Mexico, a lot of time in Panama, a lot of time in Paraguay, a bit of time in Brazil, a little bit of everything. Yeah, I don't want to give like an exact timeline, but
No, it's fine. Mas
a lot of Mexico.
Só para entender entrar mais em detalhes, assim. Então, vamos lá. Eu acho que o México é um país legal da gente falar mais, porque ele é, em grande parte, desconhecido pelo público brasileiro, né? O México, Acho que o brasileiro, no máximo, foi para Cancún ou Cidade do México, geralmente, né? Não tem muito de explorar as outras partes do país. Quais que são, assim, para você as hidden gems, ou mesmo as gems muito conhecidas, mas que valem a pena no México?
Yeah, for a Brazilian, I don't know, because a Brazilian would have very different expectations. You know, one thing we've talked about on Twitter in the past is how most of Latin America really doesn't have good beach cities, except for Brazil. Like, obviously, there's a lot of coastline and beach in Latin America, but there's not a lot of really good beach cities, you know? But Brazil has like 10 plus really good beach cities, right? You got Vitoria, you got Rio, you got Floripa, you got, you know, the Nordeste, all these different places. But when you leave Brazil, there's not really a lot of good beach cities. It's kind of weird. Like, you know, in Colombia, you got like Cartagena, but it kind of sucks, and Santa Marta, but it still kind of sucks, at least compared to Brazil. And then you can make your way up, and most of Central America is very small towns on the coast. And then in Mexico, you know, you got like Cancun and Acapulco and Vallarta and Los Cabos, and they're like all right. I mean, for beach cities, but they're like not nearly as good as as Brazilian beach cities. So I think that that's one big difference in Mexico and just sort of like in general with the rest of Latin America is that most of the it's like yeah, I don't know, like the all the real cities or big cities are inland, except maybe Lima would be the exception. Um,
Mhm.
so it's something I noticed. It's like if you really want to live in like a cool beach city, like Brazil's the best place to be. Mexico, and then like, you know, you're kind of asking a different question though, which is, you know, maybe what are some underrated places in Mexico? And for a Brazilian, I don't know. I feel like it'd be kind of weird because in Mexico, like it's like they're also Latinos. People are generally shorter. Um,
Mhm.
I don't even know what the best city for a Brazilian would be. Probably Guadalajara, I would think. I think Guadalajara would probably be the best city for a Brazilian in Mexico.
Por quê? Qual o pensamento aí?
Why Guadalajara? Well, it's a pretty big city. It's like more than 4 million people. So I think it'd probably be similar to like a Belo Horizonte in terms of the size and in terms of like it's, you know, beautiful people. It's an inland city. It's got like sort of a high elevation, like pretty good weather, like mild weather, relatively low cost of living, hot girls, nightlife, uh, business opportunities as well, and some industry and stuff. Pretty well connected. So I think like Guadalajara is kind of like the Belo Horizonte of Mexico.
Boa comparação. Acho que é difícil geralmente ter alguém que conhece tanto o Brasil quanto os outros países, assim, para dar essa comparação direta, né? BH e Guadalajara. Mas assim, não, de forma geral, você vê que para quem quer o estilo de vida praieiro, o Brasil acaba sendo uma opção mais top. Então, no caso, o resto da América Latina, para quem quer cidade grande, para quem quer montanhas, acho que também seria uma boa mencionar, né? No Brasil não tem muito. Então você diz, quem quer praia no resto da América Latina vai ser mais em vilas pequenas.
So what would be some mountain cities I would recommend?
Isso.
Um, Good question. I mean, Mexico City's crazy. Mexico City's pretty crazy. It's worth seeing. I don't think I would recommend anyone ever live there because the pollution is insane. But it's definitely worth visiting. It's a pretty cool place. It's very dynamic. I think anyone that's used to Sao Paulo would probably find Mexico City similar, but probably better, I would say, in a lot of ways. I mean, kind of depends, but pretty similar. Um, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I think because Mexico has a lot of different vibes for a lot of different people, right? It's the second biggest country in Latin America by population. Brazil's 200 plus million. Mexico's about 110 million. So it's the second biggest country, and it has a lot of different vibes in a lot of cities. So you have like desert cities, you have very lush rainforest, green cities, and a little bit of everything in between. So I think there's different vibes for different people. There's big cities, there's small towns, and it's all pretty cool. And I think Mexico has a lot of culture as well. Like I think it has some of the most culture in Latin America. But so I think people are I don't know. I think Mexico's cool. I've definitely seen Brazilians that have been like successful there. Certainly in Mexico City, like a lot of Brazilians in business in Mexico City. But yeah.
Me surpreende, porque eu não vejo quase nada de brasileiros, pelo menos que chegam pra gente, querendo ir pro México, assim. Geralmente, o que vem pra gente tá querendo ficar ou pela América do Sul, né, Paraguai, Uruguai, as coisas mais próximas, ou se não, ir pra Europa. Você chegou a conhecer muitos brasileiros pelo México?
Not too many, but there's definitely some. There's definitely some in like Tulum, Playa del Carmen, and there's definitely some in Mexico City. But yeah, there's a good amount in Tulum, I think.
Acho que Tulum tem um pouco de tudo quanto é lugar, né? Com o tamanho do aeroporto de Cancún. Você chegou a ficar no México durante a pandemia, não? Durante os lockdowns?
I was also in Brazil for a while in the lockdowns as well, which was an interesting experience.
Como que foi a diferença, assim, da experiência lockdown no México e no Brasil? Qual país você se sentiu mais livre no dia a dia?
Yeah, well, Mexico was like known for being a country that was open, right? So a lot of people came to Mexico in the lockdown because they knew it was open. They were like, okay, like Tulum, Playa del Carmen, it's open, we can party there, whatever. And so a lot of people from all over the world came to Mexico because they knew it was open and that was the official policy. Brazil, it was not the official policy that it was open, but on the ground, it was very open. You know what I mean? Like on the ground, people were still doing stuff. It was like hop on the party boat, like kiss a bunch of girls on the boat, like this and that, like acting like there was no pandemic, but that wasn't the official policy. So the lucky few travelers that decided to go to Brazil during the pandemic were in a really interesting spot because there was not a lot of gringos, not a lot of tourists, so you kind of had the country to yourself, and things were actually pretty open.
Acho que essa é a verdadeira hidden gem, né? Quando todo mundo tem uma percepção do país que, na verdade, não é a realidade no on the ground, né? Em relação ao México, de forma geral, assim, você vê que com o tanto de americanos e de canadenses, já é um país em que você consegue viver de boa, sem precisar aprender espanhol? Ou você vê que, pô, não, ainda assim, sem o espanhol, você não consegue ter uma experiência boa no país?
In Mexico in particular,
Sim.
I think you can get by without Spanish, I would say, in a lot of places, but it's going to make your experience very different. And with regards to Brazil, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons a lot of gringos don't go to Brazil is because the language is just too big of a barrier. They think, like Americans think, oh, I did 2 years of Spanish in high school, like it's good enough, and I'll go down to, Spanish-speaking Latin America. So they feel like a bit more familiarity, whereas Brazil just feels more foreign, right? Like Brazil is just as far as Argentina, but there's a way more gringos in Argentina than there are in Brazil. And it's not really because of the cost of living or the visas or anything like that. Like the visas are pretty similar. The cost of living is pretty similar. The reason they're there is they just feel more of a sense of familiarity with Argentina and with Spanish in general, which kind of works, which has its pros and cons. So yeah, I think that's one of the big reasons there's not too many Americans in Brazil.
Qual que você diria que é o país ou os países que é mais familiar para quem é americano, canadense, que mais te lembra do seu país e que é mais friendly de forma geral, que é mais amigável para um expatriado?
In the world, I'd probably say Ireland, where I know there's also a lot of Brazilians. I went to Ireland actually like a year and a half ago, and I met so many Brazilians. It was pretty cool. Like I went to the park to play basketball, and it was like all Brazilians and this and that. Went to the bar, and it was like Brazil night. So I know there's a lot of a lot of Brazilians in Ireland, and I think that's a great country for familiarity and friendly people. But in Latin America, I mean, it's gonna be Mexico, Costa Rica, and Panama. Those would probably be like the three most familiar seeming to an American.
Eu iria chutar esses 3 países quando você falou, pô, realmente. Porque a Costa Rica já tem tanto uma vibe de expatriados, de família, de aposentados se mudando para lá. O Panamá, aqui para o nosso público, eu acho engraçado porque o pessoal chega, pô, tô ganhando não sei quantos $1000, eu quero ir para Miami porque o meu negócio precisa ter interação com americanos e a gente, não, por favor, vai para Panamá, são 4 horas de voo. O que você acha que os brasileiros precisam saber mais sobre o Panamá? Quais são as coisas interessantes, tanto a nível de balada quanto de negócios, que tu acha que vale a pena ter dito?
Yeah, Panama's kind of weird because it has this reputation of being like a business hub, but it's actually pretty hard to do business there. Like the banking doesn't really work all that well, and it's hard to start businesses, and even when you start them, there's a lot of rules and stuff. So it is kind of hard to do business. Like I think if you want to do business with Americans, you really just got to go right to Miami, and obviously lots of Brazilians in Miami. So Panama, I know there are a lot of Brazilians in Panama. Maybe it works well for like multinational corporations or something. Francisco, kind of knows what I'm talking about in terms of, Panama's kind of a weird place to do business, but I don't know. I think the real business hub is definitely Miami.
Sim. Acho que ele tava falando não no sentido de ter muitos brasileiros no Panamá, mas de ter muitos americanos ou canadenses que têm dinheiro. Essa gente na América Latina muitas vezes acaba indo para o Panamá, né? Pelo menos, assim, eu tô passando bastante tempo na Colômbia, né? E quando eu vejo o nível de renda dos expatriados que estão na Colômbia e os que estão no Panamá, costuma ser uma diferença bem grande. Não sei se você notou algo semelhante.
I mean, it's definitely a different type of person that goes to Colombia versus that goes to Panama for Americans. Like I think in Colombia, you're going to see more young people. You're going to see, single people, or it's more like single people, not so much families. Like you're not really going to see American families going to Colombia. But in Panama, you're going to see families, you're going to see retirees. How do you call it? Jubilados. But a lot of
Aposentados em português.
How do you call it?
Aposentados.
Aposentados is retirees. Aposentados. Yeah, it's like really a lot of retirees in Panama. Honestly, I think to some extent they were sort of like sold a dream when they moved down there, because it is still quite expensive, Panama, and yeah, I mean, and there's not a lot of like livable places in Panama either, right? You have Panama City, like the humidity is insane, and so there's obviously you have the mountains, you have the town that I don't want to say the name because it starts with a B, and I know it's a bad word in Brazil, and you guys are gonna get me in trouble, but yeah, I think Panama's cool. It was actually like where reggaeton was founded. So a lot of people think reggaeton started in Puerto Rico or something, but it actually started in Panama with Jamaican immigrants that moved to Panama to work on the railroad and stuff. So I think Panama has a lot of pretty cool culture, but I think it's like really not that livable in a lot of ways for Americans.
Isso, acho que é um bom contraste, porque especialmente nesses ramos de offshoring e tudo mais, o pessoal costuma falar muito bem do Panamá, né? Que não é o melhor lugar para americanos e tudo mais. E, é legal ver uma opinião distinta, assim. Para você, opinião pessoal, não precisa ser objetiva, científica, nada, mas qual você diria que são os 3 melhores países da América Latina pro aposentado e pro solteiro?
For retirees, 3 best countries to retire. I think it kind of depends on your budget, but I would say Mexico, Costa Rica, and the third one's hard to say. Um, Third one's hard to say, but Mexico and Costa Rica are probably the top 2 for retirees. To be single, it's I mean Brazil's number 1 for sure. Brazil's number 1. Number 2 is probably Colombia. Number 3 is probably could be Mexico. Yeah, well, I'm not sure, but Brazil and Colombia are probably number 1 and number 2, and then number 3 kind of depends a little bit. But yeah, Brazil's the best place to be single.
Apoiamos essa classificação. E acho que o terceiro grupo que ficou faltando, mas também não menos importante, seria o das famílias, assim, pais na casa dos 30, 40, querendo criar filhos. Bons lugares para criar filhos.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot more of that, man. I'm probably you are as well in your business, on both sides of things. Maybe like Brazilian families that want to leave, and then also maybe North American families that want to come to Latin America. And I'm seeing a lot more of it. I'm seeing it for a number of reasons. One is the cost of living in the US and Canada is just insane. I think that's part of it. I think the homeschooling thing, as you kind of mentioned, is part of it as well. I think the vaccine policies is another. I think the healthcare in general is another problem. Like healthcare is just terrible in the US and terrible in Canada. You can't even get a doctor. And so I think a lot of families are going to Latin America for better healthcare, for lower cost of living, and good climate as well. And I think it's great, and more family friendly vibes. Like I think the culture is more family friendly in general, because in Canada and the US, like people just aren't having kids, and so the culture isn't really like used to kids. You know what I mean? Like I meet a lot of people, and like we have a baby, and in my family, like a young baby, and when we go meet people and we say like, hey, hold the baby, they're like, this is my first time ever holding a baby, type of thing. They're like, I haven't held a baby in 5 years or whatever. And it's like, it's really at that point where like Canadians, Americans, they'll be 25, 30 years old. They've never held a baby in their arms in their entire life. But you go to Latin America, you go to Mexico, you go to probably even Brazil too. I know birth rates are kind of declining everywhere, including Brazil, but I'm sure most Brazilians who are 25 years old have held a baby before, because they've had to be a babysitter for their cousin or any number of situations, right? And so I think Latin America is just much more family friendly and more baby friendly.
Acho que você mencionou que a gente também tá perdendo ali a taxa de natalidade, mas acho que a gente provavelmente ainda tá o quê? 1 ou 2 décadas de distância, assim, do que tá acontecendo na Europa e América do Norte, né? A gente provavelmente vai passar pelo mesmo problema daqui a 1 década, mas por enquanto ainda é um lugar que tem mais crianças e mais jovens ao redor, né? Mas então, os top 3 que você tem visto para essa categoria, esse público?
Families? It kind of depends what families are used to, but I think a lot of the families I talk to are like pretty urban that want to do this. They're from like a reasonably big city in the US. Let's just say a family from Denver, Colorado. Well, I had one family that from Denver, and they wanted to leave the US, and they kind of were thinking about Paraguay. Maybe they were seeing it on Twitter or whatever. And the dad went down to do a trip to Paraguay, like a scouting exploratory trip by himself, to check it out first. And he's like, there's no fucking way I'm raising a family in Paraguay. It was just like too raw. it was like too much of a downgrade, I guess you could say, on certain factors. So he couldn't get his mind around that. But I think someone like this typical Denver family, you know, two kids, two adults making good money, they'd probably be more comfortable somewhere with more amenities and conveniences. So maybe they'd, but also not somewhere that's too far south because like to fly to Uruguay or Chile, it's just too damn far for most people. So really, they're looking at Costa Rica, um, like Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, just because it's close. I think, you know, El Salvador is obviously really cool right now. I'm excited to check it out soon. You know, historically, a lot of people went to the islands as well. Like a lot of rich people used to, and I guess still kind of go to the Bahamas and Barbados and things like that. But yeah, I think for the average American family, um, Mexico makes the most sense, and then maybe Costa Rica in second place.
No fim das contas, geografia determina muita coisa, né? Essa coisa de não ir para a Ásia né, basicamente bloqueia um continente inteiro pela questão geográfica, que querendo ou não, é como você ganha o seu dinheiro, ou então como você vai
And dude, and a lot of American families are going to Portugal. So, I mean, that's kind of in your wheelhouse a bit, but dude, they like Americans love Portugal because it's like civilized in a way that Latin America isn't sometimes. The English levels are really high. Like the English in Portugal is insanely good, and you know, it's pretty close, especially from someone on the East Coast. Like there's lots of direct flights from New York and Boston and Washington and Miami and stuff, and it's barely a 4 or 5 hour flight. It's like just as close as Costa Rica, really. So I think a lot of American families are going to Portugal as well.
Isso eu definitivamente notei quando eu tava em Portugal, a quantidade de pessoas falando inglês por todos os lados, assim, agora tá com realmente muita gente, tanto americanos quanto ingleses. Eu cheguei a conhecer vários em Lisboa e por ali. Mas no fim das contas, né, as pessoas escolhem as melhores opções que estão mais próximas, né, de onde é a sua casa. Então,
You know, I do have a theory though that like maybe in like 20 years the planes are going to be twice as fast and it's going to make the world a lot smaller because right now to fly to Brazil is if you manage to get a direct flight, it's like a what 11, 12 hour direct flight. It's a long travel day that most people don't want to do. But imagine like 20 years from now we got electric planes and who knows what else Elon Musk is going to create for us. But I think the flights are going to be shorter. Like, and I think once the flights get shorter, then places like Brazil, Uruguay, Chile, that were once like the end of the world and way too far away, I think they'll become more practical options for people.
eu concordo, assim, tem muitas jurisdições que se você olha no papel são muito interessantes, né? Tanto na questão de tax, quanto liberdades, quanto nível de desenvolvimento, segurança, qualidade de vida, enfim. Mas no fim das contas são simplesmente muito longe, né? Acaba que mesmo que um país faça de tudo para atrair imigrantes, às vezes a questão geográfica acaba dificultando isso, né? Um país que eu gosto de mencionar em relação a isso é Ilhas Maurício. Ilhas Maurício, se você olha assim, nos índices, em tudo, é um país muito interessante, mas, cara, tá longe de tudo. Só não tá longe de quem é africano, mas todo o resto acaba ficando muito longe. Então, sabe, até agora eu não tive um cliente que quis se mudar para Ilhas Maurício em, sei lá, 3 anos de operação aqui 4 anos de operação aqui na SETI. Então, né, para vocês, o México acaba sendo o que o Paraguai é para os brasileiros, né? O país que tá logo ali. Que tá bem ao lado.
Paraguay, I really like how there's a lot of Brazilian influence because when I go to Paraguay, I can get acai, you can get you know, like all different types of Brazil. You get coxinhas, you get like all different types of Brazilian stuff in Paraguay. You know, you can when you go to the bar in Paraguay, they're playing reggaeton and then they're also playing Brazilian funky. You know, so you kind of get a bit of both worlds. So I think Paraguay kind of borrowed all the best things about Argentina. You know, the espresso and empanadas and stuff like that. And then they also borrowed some of the best things about Brazil, and you can kind of get it all in Paraguay. So that's one thing I like about over there.
Concordo 100%. Para mim, chegar no Paraguai, você tem Guaraná, você tem tudo ali, é muito conveniente. A pessoa não se sente próxima de casa ainda, né? De qualquer maneira. Qual que é o seu veredito do Paraguai? Porque é o país que acho que mais se fala atualmente no Twitter, né? Da residência Paraguai, residência Paraguai, residência Paraguai. Qual que é a sua opinião pessoal, assim? Como você compararia Paraguai e Panamá, por exemplo, que são as duas residências aí mais tradicionais?
Comparing the residents specifically or just like life?
Não, os países mesmo, a vida.
Países mesmo. Yeah, I mean, Paraguay is cool. I think it's changing a lot. Like, you know, the Paraguay that I first went to 5 years ago and the Paraguay of 2024 are pretty different places. Like, back 5 years ago, they were still building those malls where I think you've been, right? Where they didn't even have like Shopping del Sol and all that. They didn't even have that like 5 years ago. I think Paraguay is definitely going to grow a lot. You know, if you look at like the population pyramid, like the majority of the population is under 18. It has like the best population pyramid in Latin America in terms of like young people and population growth. So I think like buying real estate in Paraguay makes a lot of sense because there's just going to be a lot more people and therefore more demand in the future. I think it's a pretty, you know, you have to want like a certain life or something to do Paraguay. I don't know. I mean, I think it makes sense for Brazilians definitely to get Paraguayan residency, like for sure. If you're making money online and you can go to Paraguay, like that just seems like an absolute no-brainer. Like I don't see why literally everyone hasn't done that. Like, you know what I mean? Every Brazilian at least. Whereas in Panama, I mean, it's hard to compare the two because you're comparing Paraguay, which is a landlocked country and has it's a very like sort of like an ethno state, right? With like the Guarani people and stuff versus Panama, which has two oceans and it's kind of like the meeting point between two continents or North and South America, and it has less of a identity. Like I mean, Panamanians do have an identity and a culture to some extent, but I don't know. But in any case,
pretty more cosmopolitan, right?
Yeah, it's a little more cosmopolitan, a little bit more American, a little more built up. You know, you can't, you know, a little bit more integrated in infrastructure, and I mean, there's still like bribing and stuff in Panama, I guess, but it's like a whole nother level in Paraguay. I don't know, but if I was Brazilian and I was working online, to me, like Paraguay would be a no-brainer, right?
I asked because I've already had conversations with some of our fellow friends, Jake Nomada and Mikel Hirones specifically, and also shout out to Mikel, he also was a podcast guest here before. Perdão, troquei para inglês, caraca. Eu te pergunto porque eu já tive conversas com outras pessoas aí veteranas da América Latina, como o Jake Nomada, como o Mikel Hirones, inclusive abraço pro Mikel, já foi convidado aqui no Contra o Vento também, em que ambos falaram que eles prefeririam viver em Assunção do que na cidade do Panamá. Se tivesse que escolher assim entre viver em um e viver no outro, que eles preferiam Assunção do que cidade no Panamá. E na época eu fiquei meio chocado, porque eu não tinha ido para Assunção ainda, e não tinha ido pro Panamá ainda, então eu tava meio... Pô, como assim? Pelo que eu ouço falar do Panamá...
Yeah,
enfim,
no, that's nuts. I would definitely prefer Panama, for sure. I mean, if I was to live in Panama, maybe I wouldn't live in Panama City, though. But if you told me, like, I have to live in one of these countries for the rest of my life, or even, like, 5 years, it's definitely going to be Panama, not Paraguay.
Ok. Então, ainda, apesar da umidade, ainda tem seus charmes.
Well, Paraguay's hot as hell too, man. It's not that much better. Like that, this summer in Paraguay, dude, is nuts. Like from November to March, where it's like over 40 degrees every single day. I mean, crazy.
Vance, eu acho que um tópico importante, porque a gente está falando só de país. Obviamente, o programa é sobre a América Latina. Só que a gente aqui da CETI tenta educar e mostrar, pô, não precisa ir para a Europa, não precisa ir para a Alemanha tomar 40% de imposto da tua renda, você pode ser feliz na América Latina. E a gente toma muita porrada quando a gente fica falando mal do Canadá. Eu gostaria que você pudesse explicar, com suas palavras, por que o Canadá é uma opção ruim.
Sorry, I didn't catch the last of it. It was a bit choppy, but why Canada? Porque o Canadá é ruim?
O que é ruim no Canadá que afasta as pessoas? E especificamente eu gostaria de pedir, você falou que a saúde no Canadá é ruim, e isso é algo que acho que vai chocar muita gente, assim, porque o que o Canadá tem de ruim, além, a gente tá falando da cultura e clima, mas fora isso,
Ah.
como assim a saúde é ruim, por exemplo?
So the thing is the healthcare is high in the rankings on paper in terms of, if you look at like best countries in the world for healthcare, I'm sure Canada's pretty high, but it's just outdated because, for example, last year Canada welcomed 1.3 million new residents, which for a country of 40 million people is a lot. And the healthcare system, and really almost every institution is just overwhelmed. And so there's probably things about the healthcare system that will be very different for a Brazilian, but you have to basically get a family doctor who sort of looks after your family. It's called like a general practitioner, I guess, a family doctor. But the wait time to get a family doctor is like 2 years. Like you can't even get a family doctor. And then what happens is you can't go straight to a specialist. Like let's just say you have, I don't know, whatever, heart problems or skin problems or whatever. You can't go straight to a specialist without a note from a family doctor, but you can't get a note from a family doctor because you can't even get a family doctor. And then if you need like a surgery or different things, you'll be waiting over a year for the surgery because there's just no. And then so any like sort of what do you call it? But any kind of like surgery or any process that you need to do, you're going to be waiting a very long time to do that process. And then anything that's an emergency, like let's just say you fall and crack your head open when you're skateboarding or something and you go to the emergency room, you might be sitting in the emergency room bleeding for 24 hours before you can see a doctor because the emergency room is full because there's too many people. So there's basically not enough doctors. There's not enough healthcare professionals in general. So for emergency things, it's really bad. For long-term things, it's really bad. For ongoing care, like sort of proactive or family care, is very bad. And a lot of things you can't even pay for either because everything's public and there's no private as well. Like most countries have like I think it's called a 2-tier system where some stuff is public, some stuff is private. If you're poor, you can go to the public one and maybe it's not the best, but at least it's there. And if you have money, you can go to a private one. And I think that's how Brazil works. But in Canada, there's no private one. So even if you have money, there's still no one to go to. And so rich Canadians with money, if they need a surgery done or whatever, they have to go to the States or go somewhere outside of Canada to do that process. And then the States is super expensive too. And so like you basically end up having to go to Colombia or Turkey or Mexico or something just to get a teeth cleaning. So the whole system is like really bad. Like I'm sure it was pretty good 10 years ago, and I think it's still maybe good if you have like really expensive health problems, like maybe you have some type of cancer that would cost $100,000 a year or some like insane amount of money in another country, maybe Canada's good because at least they'll cover it. You might be waiting for a while, but at least they'll cover it. But for just like normal stuff, day-to-day stuff, or really like 99% of people, the system is completely failing from a healthcare perspective. Like it's horrible. It's like it's unusable. It's almost as if it doesn't exist.
É insano você falar que não existe a opção de pagar pra ir no privado pra um monte de coisas.
Não existe a opção.
Não entra na minha cabeça, em qualquer outro país que eu já fui na vida, se você, ok, beleza, não quero esperar o público, você vai lá, vai num hospital privado, paga e resolve, digamos. E não existir essa possibilidade me parece muito alienígena. Assim.
Yeah, it's weird. And then, sorry to interrupt, but then, and it's not just healthcare too, because a lot of these problems with the public institutions, they just haven't caught up with the population growth. So for example, schools, even if you get, like, you buy a nice house in a nice school district, well, the schools are full. So your kid won't even be able to go to that school now because there's like a waiting list, and you're going to have to bring your kid to a school that's like a 20-minute drive away, that's like on the other side of town, where there's space, because there's no space in the schools, because, and like the classrooms are much more full than they used to be. So I mean, so it's the schools too. It's really most public services. I think like daycares are full. People can't even get a spot at a daycare. Do you guys call it a niñera or something? But like there's no spots at the daycare. So even if you want like even if the parents want to go to work, they can't even find a daycare to take care of the kids because all the daycares are full. So there's like all these problems.
Seria uma creche, né, pra deixar os bebês. Cara, que louco. Especialmente essa parte da saúde me deixou bem chocado. Diogo, o que você ia falar, cara?
O que eu acho absurdo também a pessoa não conseguir agendar uma consulta. Não, precisa primeiro do médico da família, aí tu vai esperar 2 anos. E se conseguir um médico da família, aí ele vai te autorizar numa consulta. É surreal tu tá de trabalhar, o Canadá cobrar o imposto que cobra e tá nessa situação. Depois a gente que é terceiro mundo, pô.
Essa é uma outra coisa, né? Acho que você chegou até a twittar sobre isso, Vance, que na América Latina, uma vez que você tem o contato do seu médico, cara, você fala com ele por WhatsApp. Você guarda o contato ali da...
Right, yeah, we talked about this on Twitter too, where even when you have a family doctor in Canada, you wait the 2 years or whatever, but even if you have a family doctor, you don't actually really get to talk to the doctor. You do not get his phone number under any circumstance. You can't contact your doctor. You can't text your doctor. There's no WhatsApp. You have to call the office. And then when you call the office, you speak to like a secretary or an assistant. And then you can make an appointment in the future to talk to the doctor. But there's absolutely zero doctors in Canada where you can like WhatsApp them or call them whenever you feel like it. Like you can't. The only way to talk to a doctor is to make an appointment, and you know the appointment might be months in the future, and the whole thing is just like very, very regulated. And so this is kind of what we're saying, where what kind of back to what we were talking about in the beginning, which is that like, you know, maybe you got to watch what poor people do and what wealthy people are doing is very different, because a wealthy person in Canada, they're not happy with the system because they're paying all these taxes and so forth, but they're getting literally nothing for it. Like the healthcare is not working at all. The schools aren't working at all. Most things aren't working. And it's obviously cold. But for poor people, you know, maybe it's still good because they wouldn't have had private healthcare in Brazil anyway. So they're like, well, at least the public system here is like kind of okay, maybe compared to the Brazilian public system, I guess. So, I mean, I don't know. So, you know, I think it makes sense for a certain class of people. Basically, if you're down to work in construction or like something with your hands because you have no skills at all. Like if you have no skills and you're poor, sure, Canada's probably a good place to be. But if you are rich or have skills or have flexibility or, you know, you're not down to work with your hands, you're not down to work in a restaurant for cash illegally, then there's not so much to be offered in Canada right now.
Qual que você acha, voltando aqui o assunto para a questão de América Latina, quais que você vê que são os países que são as estrelas, assim, que nos próximos 5, 10 anos você vê que, não, aqui tem futuro, digamos, as rising stars da região?
I think I'm most excited about El Salvador for sure, followed by Argentina, but I would say more El Salvador. I think it's going to be really a meeting place where a lot of a special meeting place of people who want to have an impact, who want to make a name for themselves, are probably getting together right now at Bitcoin Beach and San Salvador and this kind of thing, and they're sharing new ideas and starting new businesses, and it's kind of like I think I was watching this TV show recently, and it was like Paris, France in the 1800s, right? And you had like all these famous people like Humboldt, Napoleon, and everything, and they're getting together and they're drinking and having coffee in the salons of Paris. And it kind of got me thinking, like, where are those like 1800 Parises today? 10 years ago, it was San Francisco, and San Francisco was just huge, kind of in 2015 and kind of in that decade. And San Francisco's kind of lost a little bit of its luster. A lot of people went to Austin, a lot of people went to Miami. But I think El Salvador really has an opportunity to be one of those places, kind of like a San Francisco or a 1800s Paris, where a lot of new ideas come and people who want to have an impact are going.
Eu concordo, eu acho que uma das questões é que El Salvador ele ainda está, digamos, em termos de desenvolvimento e renda, ainda está mais para baixo, né? Se a gente comparar com Panamá, ou com Chile, ou com Uruguai, mas acho que ele vai crescer muito mais rápido do que por exemplo, o Uruguai, o Uruguai, você olha assim, tá mais ou menos estagnado, né? Não cresce, fica mais ou menos onde tá, as coisas não mudam. El Salvador agora está crescendo, cresceu o quê? 10% ao ano, um ano de PIB. Então acho que conseguindo manter, assim, talvez não consiga 10% todo ano, mas pelo menos tendo taxa de crescimento nesse nível, cara, em uma década provavelmente vai passar um monte de outros países da região. Assim, eu também tô bem empolgado. Eu ainda não cheguei a visitar El Salvador. Você já conseguiu dar uma visita exploratória?
Nah, man, I'm trying to do it. I've been doing some exploratory trips, and El Salvador is definitely one of the next on my list. I'm like pretty down to even move there. Like I know it would be a huge boom for my business and stuff like that. Could you imagine my Latin life just becomes like a El Salvador propaganda account? I think it would work pretty well.
Provavelmente conseguiria algum sponsorship aí do governo para trazer o pessoal todo para El Salvador.
And you know what it is though, is that it's a place where I think safety actually really is important. And I think there's two types of safety. Like I think a normal person and a normal family is actually a lot more safe in Latin America than they think they are. Like a normal person's not going to get kidnapped or anything, is actually by and large safer than the United States in a lot of ways, Latin America. But I think one thing I've noticed in Mexico is that it's really hard to meet like the super mover and shakers, like the super rich people, the important people. It's really hard to meet important people in Mexico because they're basically like hiding, because they once you get like really important, and this is the same thing in Brazil, and I've heard you mention this somewhere where you use the example of like a supermarket, like let's say you're like the son of like a supermarket founder in Brazil, right? You kind of need to keep a low profile and move in certain circles because you're afraid of getting kidnapped or extorted or something like that. And so there is a lot of flexing in Brazil, but I think like the really, really rich people in Brazil and in Mexico have a really low profile, and they're not really out there, and they're hard to meet, right? I mean, they're at the country clubs or whatever, but they're really kind of hard to set up meetings with and to just meet on like a chance encounter and have that meeting of ideas and stuff. So I think, but if those rich people in Mexico or in Brazil had a higher degree of safety and sense of security, then they would be mixing more. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the powerful things about the level of safety in El Salvador is that you can be really, really rich in El Salvador now, and you can be open about that. And you can actually, and on top of that, you can get access to government officials. Whereas, like in Brazil or in Mexico, we're basically almost like afraid of talking to government officials because they're either going to ask for a bribe or they're going to start like looking us up and trying to screw us over or something like that. Like we're kind of like afraid of them, but we kind of use them. But it's like this whole like weird political dance. But in El Salvador and in places like that, like maybe say a Singapore, it's more just it's more normal, and everyone has good intentions. And when everything's safe and there's no chance of kidnapping, and you can be more open about wealth, and you can speak to government employees, and everyone has good intentions about building a better country and economic prosperity, I think it really creates a good like a hurricane of or like snowball effect of good vibes. And I think that's really like the big thing that Latin America is missing. You know what I mean?
Sim, com certeza. O nível de, digamos, flexing e pessoas ricas na rua fazendo as suas coisas do dia a dia, e dá pra claramente notar que elas são ricas. Por exemplo, de Mônaco, eu nunca vi algo assim no Brasil ou na América Latina de forma geral, né? Nem no Panamá, por exemplo, de ter essa abertura à riqueza. Das pessoas simplesmente estão aí pela rua, tá tomando um café. Ah, não, essa pessoa aqui tem um patrimônio líquido de 40 milhões de euros, tá aqui no bar junto com as outras pessoas, tipo, tá todo mundo aí. Eu acho que talvez o mais próximo que eu veria disso no Brasil seria Balneário Camboriú, eu acho. De existir uma riqueza local de pessoas que estão, sabe, estão no seu flexing e tudo mais, mas que não tem tanto perigo à segurança. Mas ainda assim não é
It's not even
nível...
about the flexing, and I know what you're saying, but it's more just like not feeling afraid if people know how much money you're worth. And that's why like San Francisco is able to function, and places like Boston and New York, is that you can know someone is worth $10 million or $100 million, and they're not like, they don't have to roll with security, and they're able to just like live a normal life and go to meetings and meet new people and maybe find other young entrepreneurs to invest in. And 10 years ago in San Francisco, you could do that. You know, you could be like, yeah, I'm a billionaire. Like, what about you? What do you do? You know what I mean? And it's like you could be pretty chill, but now San Francisco is pretty damn dangerous. And so I think a lot of people are a lot more careful there, but they still do it. Like you go to any like random cafe in San Francisco, and the guy on his computer might be worth $10-20 million easily, if not more, right? And I think that's like really healthy to be in places like that, because where I am in Mexico, like I'm not meeting people, you know, worth $10-20 million just chilling on their computer. Like they would not be able to do that. You know what I mean? Or at least they wouldn't be able to be open about it. And you know what I was thinking, because you spent a lot of time in Colombia, is maybe you've seen like, have you seen on Twitter and stuff where they'd say like millionaire meetup Medellin or like Bitcoin meetup Medellin, and then all the comments are like, you guys are idiots, like you're gonna get fucked up. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can't be open like that in a place like Colombia. And that's exactly what I'm saying, is like it's unfortunate that people can't be open about success, because when you can be open about success, it sort of leads to more success. And so when I think about where I want to spend time in the future, I don't know, I'm just thinking more about that a bit. Like I want to be somewhere where people can be more open about success, because that's going to lead to future success.
Sim, você pode estar numa comunidade de pessoas bem-sucedidas e poder estar bem com isso, né? Pensando até aqui eu não estou em Medellín, eu estou em Bucaramanga, mas mesmo aqui em Bucaramanga, você tem um bairro assim que é o bairro mais rico aqui de Bucaramanga, se chama Cabeceira, né, que é onde tem os melhores restaurantes e tudo mais, mas esse não é o melhor bairro de Bucaramanga. O melhor bairro de Bucaramanga fica fora de Bucaramanga, numa montanha, se chama Huitoque, que é basicamente uma gated community, né, uma comunidade fechada completamente, e é ali que vivem os ricos de verdade, sabe? Aqui, o bairro bom dentro da cidade, tipo Leblon e Ipanema, não é o melhor bairro. O melhor bairro tá longe do resto da cidade, isolado na sua própria coisinha ali, uma bolha, digamos, com segurança privadas, que não pode entrar qualquer pessoa, enfim. Né? Então, realmente, assim, você tem que, em um país como a Colômbia, meio que criar um esclave, né? Você cria uma fortaleza ali, digamos, para você conseguir viver nesse nível de renda. Nesse sentido, El Salvador acho que tá fazendo movimentos muito bons. Bom, deixa eu ver. Diogo, do seu lado, alguma outra pergunta pro Vence?
Acho que aproveitando, assim, pra gente encerrar sobre esse tópico de segurança, ele falou que, pô, El Salvador vai ser, tá construindo essa reputação como uma estrela em ascensão, que os níveis de segurança estão lá, estão confortáveis para a pessoa poder mostrar, olha, eu sou um empresário bem-sucedido. Mas e fora de El Salvador? Tudo bem, Brasil e México a gente já viu que não são exatamente lugares. Aqui no Rio tu vê um pouco dos ricos e famosos, mas porque, pô, Rio de Janeiro é normal. Às vezes a fama da pessoa blinda ela. Ninguém vai sequestrar o Zeca Pagodinho, por exemplo. Só vai arrumar mais problemas do que solução na vida. Mas, com exceção de El Salvador, que é essa promessa que está se construindo, quais são os lugares onde você conseguiria fazer esse networking que era comum em São Francisco, de você sentar numa mesa, ou ali é um milionário, vou ali trocar uma ideia com ele e tentar financiar o meu projeto. Na América Latina, quais seriam esses locais?
Ou mesmo mais abertamente, quais lugares que você pessoalmente se sentiu mais seguro na América Latina até agora?
Boa pergunta.
Yeah, well, I think there's like, when there's security for a normal person, and then there's security when people know you're rich, and that's kind of like a different dynamic, right? Because like I said, I think a lot of Latin America is totally safe for a normal person. You can just walk around, even at night, even with some AirPods in, looking at your phone. And there's a lot of places in Latin America where you can do that. You know what I mean? Where you can walk around at midnight and nothing's going to happen. But I think it's a different thing when it comes to like being a business person and people know you're rich. And if it was a safe place, you would kind of want people to know you're rich because you're always looking for ways to deploy your capital and invest and multiply your money. But in Latin America, a lot of people are more interested in just preserving capital than multiplying capital, I guess you could say. Like all those rich people in Colombia, they just probably, most of them just like inherited some coffee farms or something, and they're just trying to chill and maintain that they're not really trying to, you know what I mean, like think about new ideas and invest in innovative businesses for the most part. I mean, I think there's some overlap between like the nomad hubs and what I'm talking about, because I think there's definitely a lot of information exchange and business going on in sort of the nomad and expat hubs. So the biggest hubs would be Playa del Carmen, Tulum, Mexico City, maybe Medellin, maybe Panama City, maybe Buenos Aires. I'm trying to think where else. Probably Los Cabos as well, Puerto Vallarta. Some of the beach towns in Costa Rica, like Uvita and Jaco. El Salvador is obviously coming up. Where else? Lake Atitlan in Guatemala and Antigua. There's a lot of nomads there. Probably kind of like broke hippies though. But and then obviously you have the big financial centers in Latin America, like say Lima, Mexico City, Sao Paulo and stuff, where there's also a lot of money. But yeah, I think Latin America, I think that's one of the big things that's missing is hopefully more countries can implement something like this El Salvador model. And I kind of want to see like a Latin America where the rich people aren't like hiding. You know what I mean? I'm getting a little philosophical just because it's something I've been thinking about recently in terms of like thinking about how I want to do things in the future. I think that is probably one of the benefits of Canada for the people listening and they're interested in Canada is people can be pretty open about wealth in Canada. Um, and people make wealth in a lot of different ways in Canada. You know, for some people it's construction, for some people it's software, for some people it's oil or natural resources. And people are pretty open about wealth in Canada, not just because they want to flex, but because they want to. I mean, for a lot of reasons, right? But you don't really have to hide it as much. So I think that is one of the benefits of Canada is that you can be successful and maybe you get punished on taxes, but you don't get punished by like people trying to do bad things to you, I guess. Um, yeah, I don't know. Just kind of thinking. I know one of your hosts just left. Maybe you want to say bye there.
Não, essa questão é de construir uma sociedade de alta confiança, né? High Trust Society.
Aham.
Leva tempo, né? Acho que El Salvador está fazendo um bom trabalho e vai levar um tempo, mas eu acho que eles sim estão fazendo tudo certo, né? Estão na direção certa para realmente se tornar esse lugar na América Latina. Eu, pessoalmente, creio que Chile, ele, tirando o governo do Boric agora, né? Se eles conseguem colocar de volta um partido da oposição, acho que eles também estão bem situados para conseguir isso. E acho que a longo prazo o próprio Paraguai acho que está indo nessa direção, apesar de que ainda é muito raw, né, muito cru, muito informal, muito corrupto, mas acho que eles estão consistentemente crescendo e indo numa boa direção. Acho que seriam os meus piques pessoais também. Vance, do seu lado, alguma última mensagem para nossa audiência que está interessada em se mudar para a América Latina ou para o próprio Canadá?
Yeah, I think like I don't even know what Americans, Canadians are going to listen to this. Maybe they're trying to practice their Portuguese or something. But I think one of my big messages is that Latin America is actually great at every stage of life. So when you're single, Latin America is the best place in the world by far. When you're married and raising kids, I think Latin America also makes a lot of sense because it's so family friendly, low cost of living, walkable cities, and a lot of accessible healthcare. Homeschooling is possible, low taxes. Easy to do birth tourism or obtain multiple passports, internationalize. Good weather, so the kids are happy. Different types of lifestyles that you can have. So I really think for families, Latin America is great. And then for retirees, which is kind of that third phase of being an adult, Latin America is great because you have the low cost of living, you have proximity to the US and Canada and direct flights, you have again, the good weather. Typically, Latin American countries have exemptions where they don't tax pension income for retirees as well. And so I think really at every stage, whether you're single, whether you're raising a family, whether you're retiring, I think there's something for everyone in Latin America. And I think people kind of forget that and maybe they think it's only for young people or it's only for retirees or something. But I really think at every life stage, Latin America really makes a lot of sense. And then for the flip side of the coin, for Latin Americans, it's hard to give advice to everyone because people are at different stages. I think it is really important to have a first world passport, and I think it'll be even more important in the future. So I think if you're Brazilian and you're only Brazilian and that's your only passport, I really think you should do everything within your power to get a first world passport. So maybe that means Spain with the 2-year citizenship there. Maybe that means Portugal. And how many years is in Portugal? Is it 1, 2, 5 years for Brazilians? 5 years?
5 years, like everyone else.
Yeah. So maybe do Spain for 2 years. Maybe do Portugal for 5 years. Maybe do Canada. I think it's 5 years in Canada. Maybe 3 years under certain circumstances. maybe go to Chile because you get the residency rights, and then with Chile, it's basically a first world passport. But I really think every Brazilian should A, work online, and B, do everything you can to get a first world passport. So I think both those things are absolute musts. I think people should make them a priority in their life. Number one, to work online, for it's just going to give you a huge level of freedom. And then it's going to unlock making the second goal of a first world passport a lot easier. And you could kind of take your pick based on your circumstances, whether you prefer Europe or Canada or maybe Chile. But I would definitely do something to improve your passport circumstance. So.
Ótima dica, e a gente também recomenda muito isso, né? Para quem não tem direito a uma cidadania aí pelo avô, pela avó, italiana, enfim, essas são as mais fáceis para ter um segundo passaporte que dá uma vantagem real, né, para o brasileiro. Seria Portugal, Espanha, Canadá e o próprio Chile. Ah, mas por que não, sei lá, Argentina? Porque é a mesma coisa, né? A Argentina não dá muito que você já não tenha como brasileiro. O Chile, sim. Então, muito boa dica. E Vence, para quem quiser mais conteúdo, guias, apoio com viagens e relocação pela América Latina, onde que eles podem encontrar o seu trabalho?
Yeah, well, the real experts are Seti and Francisco, so that's who you guys should definitely go to. Anyone listening to this, is I highly recommend Seti, I highly recommend Francisco. They're truly some experts, and I'm really happy to hang out with you guys, with all the co-hosts here, because I think you guys are young. I'm pretty young too, and I think I'm very excited to see where you guys are going to be in 10 years, 20 years, and I hope you keep doing similar stuff to this, right? Like something with internationalization and helping people out, because I know you guys are going to go very far, and I'm very excited to see how amazingly successful you guys are going to be if you stay consistent. But if they still want to find me, well, mylatinlife.com. There's the My Latin Life podcast. We have over 150 episodes that people can check out. And we're most active on Twitter/X, where you can find us at My Latin Life.
Muito obrigado, Vence, aí. Vão para o site do Vence de qualquer maneira, ele estava sendo humilde, mas especialmente algo que eu vou muito no site do Vence é para os guias de cidade, os city guides aí. Especialmente, por exemplo, Bucaramanga. Não tinha ninguém falando de Bucaramanga na internet, mas havia um guia do My Latin Life. Então, Venezuela também, por exemplo, eu fui para algumas cidades na Venezuela e tinha um guia do Jake, também os conteúdos do My Latin Life. Então, assim, para quem está viajando, especialmente está viajando para fora do destino mais convencional, né? Se você está indo para, sei lá, Playa del Carmen, provavelmente vai ter vários outros sites com guias também, mas tem várias cidades que, cara, o Vence é o único que está cobrindo. Então, recomendo muito conferir tanto o podcast, que é muito bom, quanto também os City Guides que tem no My Latin Life. E é isso, vou estar o link aqui embaixo, tá na descrição desse episódio, tanto do site quanto do Twitter do My Latin Life. Sigam lá, acompanhem o trabalho do Vence, que é muito bom. E acho que é isso, Vence, muito obrigado por ter participado desse podcast aqui com a gente. Demorou, mas saiu. Foi um prazer ter você aqui conosco. E a gente se fala provavelmente quando eu der uma passada aí no México ou você venha visitar de volta no Brasil.
Yeah, man, soon. Obrigado pela oportunidade.
Valeu, um abraço. Tchau, tchau.
Valeu, tchau, tchau.